In India, the central, state and district authorities are considered as responsible platforms for disaster management. Their function ranges from planning to evaluation of disaster management operations. In addition to the services of these stipulated authorities, other stakeholders like police and trained forces participation is necessary. The state police and fire services as the first responders get into action when a disaster strikes a particular area. But during earthquakes, cyclones, tsunamis and terrorist attacks, it will be a hectic task for the civil administration to manage them effectively. In addition to the civil administration's initiative, we need services from specially trained forces in mitigation and post response operations. To meet such gaps and for efficient disaster management practices, the Disaster Management Act 2005, Section 44, subsection 1 insisted on establishing National Disaster Response Force. At present, 9 trained battalions are in functional mode across the country and 2 others are approved. NDRF team comprises skillful staff, experts in various trades and equipped with advanced tools for strenuous operations. Along with the civil administration and national disaster relief forces, the armed forces, army, navy and the air force play a vital role in disaster management interventions. The prime responsibility of these forces is to safeguard the country from external threats, and the secondary functions include assisting the civil administration in maintaining law and order, disaster management and in emergency on purposeful requests. So, this lesson emphasizes on the role of national disaster relief forces and armed forces in disaster management. It tries to throw light on structure of crisis management group, national disaster relief force and their functions, trainings and related case studies. Objectives of this lesson, and after the completion of the lesson you will be able to National Disaster Relief Force and its functions in disaster management. Explain the armed forces involved in disaster management. You will be able to describe the institutional structure of disaster crisis management group and other structures. Describe the roles and responsibilities of the armed forces. And now let us see the armed forces as a stakeholder. So, conventionally, the armed forces are deployed when the circumstances are afar to the coping capacities of the civil administration, relying on their immense potentialities, dexterity, competence and training bring them to the top of the responders list. Notable services has been rendered by the armed forces in dealing adverse situations. Usually, their contribution is seen in aftermath of disasters in providing facilities like transportation, medical, communication, search and rescue operations, etc. So, there is a paradigm shift in the role of armed forces from a reactive mode to a proactive mode by providing preparedness trainings and training for trainers, training of trainers, etc. A special emphasis lay on preparing them in other than war operations, where disasters as an important constituent. There is a steep increase in the incidences of natural calamities across the world, and India is prone to all types of disasters due to its geographical location and formation. Their contribution is seen in all the man-made and natural disasters in the recent past. Disaster management plans have to focus on the involvement in emergency services in smooth and quicker way. National Disaster Response Force. During the late 90s, natural calamities that happened across the globe brought the issue onto the discussion table. On a serious note, the United Nations adopted the Yokohama Strategy Plan and the Hyogo Framework for Action to address disasters effectively. Even India had witnessed severe disasters in that particular point of time, compelled it to make out backed with a comprehensive legal instrument, the Disaster Management Act 2005. According to the Act, at NDMA and SDMA and DDMAs were constituted to plan and execute the disaster management interventions. The Act also mandated to constitute National Disaster Response Force for effective disaster management. In view of that, in 2006, National Disaster Relief Force was formed, initially with 8 battalions, and now it has reached to 12 with 1149 well trained persons in each battalion. The force was involved in non disaster roles prior to 2008, but later the force was declared as a committed strength for disaster management under the commanding control of Director General, National Disaster Relief Force. Major objectives of the National Disaster Relief Force include providing trained disaster response activities, proactive role and deployment in crisis situations, and training state disaster management authority and enhancing the capacities of the communities. So, out of these 12 battalions, 3 battalions belong to Border Security Force and 3 of Central Reserve Police Force CRPF and 2 each from Central Industrial Security Force and Indo-Tibetan Border Force ITBP and Sahasra Seema Bal SSB. Every battalion have 18 self-reliant search and rescue teams, 45 trained squad in each. Each battalion undergo a specialized training to tackle CBRN crisis, which means chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear crises. And now the National Disaster Relief Force battalions across the country. These 12 National Disaster Relief Force battalions were established in different spots closer to the most vulnerable areas to reach immediately. Since its inception, National Disaster Relief Force has been thoroughly involved itself in response activities and rescued thousands of people during Kosi floods in Bihar, Ballari, Jalandhar, Chennai, Hudhud cyclone, etc. Get into a case study from Assam. In Assam, a heavy downpour in Assam in 2017 affected more than 10,000 people and around 17 districts. An immediate deployment of National Disaster Relief Force had saved nearly 94 persons and evacuated 8,000 people. Paramilitary forces, in addition to the services of armed forces, the paramilitary forces under the control of Government of India are also deployed in the emergencies. Some of the important paramilitary forces that are in India are Border Security Force, Central Reserve Police Force CRPF, Central Industrial Security Force CISF, Indo-Tibetan Border Force ITBP, Railway Protection Force RPF, Assam Rifles, National Security Guard NSG, Coast Guard, Rapid Action Force RAF and Territorial Army. And now let us see the role of armed forces in disaster management. On a written requisition from the civil authority, the armed forces swing into action to elevate the crisis situation. In India, the major task of armed forces is to protect the country from external threats and maintaining the law and order. As a secondary function, they are deployed to assist civil authorities in crisis situations. Due to increasing number of incidences of natural and man-made disasters in the country, their services are essential. The Ministry of Defence is responsible for the search and rescue operations and for providing communications, transportation and rehabilitation, engineering, power and medical services. In the recent past, the role of armed forces extended beyond search and rescue operations. The legal instruments and policy on disaster management emphasized on the proactive measures and insisted on mainstreaming these disaster management plans with the development plans. Usually, the task of defense forces is to intervene into search and rescue operations, information to control rooms, evacuation, relief camps, transporting relief material, disbursement of essential commodities, maintaining essential services, diving efforts, and constructing, repairing the roads and bridges, etc. Usually, the armed forces are considered as prime responders because of their intrinsic potency, discipline, commitment, and well trained and organized, extremely motivated and non political and unprejudiced temperament, and ability to work in unfavorable circumstances. The organization. The Central Relief Commissioner leads the District Disaster Management Committee, which is under the Ministry of Home Affairs, and he coordinates all other respective ministries. The Defense Ministry synchronizes its action with Ministry of Home Affairs with the assistance of Disaster Crisis Management Group. The Defense Ministry also coordinates the Army, Navy and Air Force for response operations. And now let us see the Defense Crisis Management Group, DCMG. The DCMG has to play multiple roles in surveillance, analyzing, formulating plans, strategic estimations and coordinating. Furtherance of these plans shall be taken up by the concerned services. The organogram of the armed forces depicts its systematically positioned units to enable the force for adaptation and effective functioning. The expert squads are trained to help local authorities and other agencies. So, let us see what are the functions of this command headquarters. Coordinating, controlling and deploying different stakeholders, working round the clock from the operation center, cooperating the state governments and civil authorities from alerts to relief interventions. Dissemination of information, some typical capabilities of the armed forces in responding to disasters. Army, study, exploration and damage appraisals, providing infrastructure for control rooms, involving in search and rescue operations and assisting in providing necessary relief services, transport and delivery of material, maintaining necessary services, re-establishment of infrastructure for all modes of transport, health and sanitation, coordinating the local authority for provision of basic amenities, detection of explosives and deactivating them, maintaining law and order, awareness generations and mock drills in the communities, and CBRN response. And coming to the Navy, assistance in set up infrastructure facilities for control and coordination, surveillance watch in the disaster affected spots, deployment of relief squads, transport and delivery of material, maintaining necessary services, re-establishment of infrastructures for all modes of transport, and health and sanitation, coordinating the local authority for provision of basic amenities, assisting in deep diving tasks. And coming to the Air Force, investigation of rapid assessments, air transport of trained relief personnel and essential materials, air droppings, air evacuating facilities, deserted people. The force in the past in the post disaster response should coordinate with the civil authority to serve the affected with integrity. The initial phase of intervention shall be focused on addressing the immediate needs and saving lives. Next phase focused on coordinating with the other stakeholders for a synergy in the interventions. Emphasis lay on reconstruction and rehabilitation aspects for a smooth civilian order in the affected areas. The role of defense forces in various stages of disaster management. Preparatory phase refers to the pre-disaster interventions, which includes forecasting, cautioning, preventive measures and contingency plan and checklist for possible disasters, focusing on establishment of suitable infrastructure for forecasting and warning system, conducting mock drills. In the emergency phase, begins with warning of a disaster, immediate relief assistance to the affected, and continues until the situation reaches to a satisfactory level. In the rehabilitation phase, insists on restoring necessary services, transport and communication systems. The reconstruction phase is an enduring looking into building a resilient communities and structures. Preparatory, consulting the state and local authorities, identifying, formulating contingency plan and studying the disaster management plans. Preparatory exercises for executing investigations at grassroots level, sensitizing the squads and conducting rehearsals. Emergency, task assignments to the squads, coordinating with the other stakeholders, reaching the respective spots. Evacuation, providing medical assistance. And coming to rehabilitation phase, assisting civil administration, restoring necessary services, transport and communication systems. And the final phase, reconstruction. So, here a limited role, the major task will be played by the civil administration. And assistance, infrastructure for command and control, providing communication systems and deploying trained personnel. In medical aid, and instantaneous healthcare provisions for saving number of lives, transporting relief material. The forces are well equipped with the necessary transporting vehicles. Those available facilities can be used for transporting of relief material. Establishing relief camps, to set up and maintain relief camps, assisting the government and non-governmental organizations in establishing relief camps. Constructing and repairing bridges and roads. The trained engineers undertake the necessary steps in restoring damaged facilities due to disasters. Maintaining necessary services, evacuation, search and rescue operations. So, let us see the emergency support functions. Transporting relief material and provision of vehicles, communication. Establishing and maintaining communication systems like radio and warning systems, dissemination of necessary information. And public works, constructing temporary roads and buildings and assisting the state and district authorities in restoration. Firefighting, rescue and searching, extinguish fire, information and planning, preparing own contingency plans and studying the National Disaster Management Authority and State Disaster Management Authority plans. Coming to mass care, establishing and maintaining camps and temporary shelters. Resource support, provision of necessary resources. Health and medical, providing psychosocial support, stress and trauma care, immediate medical assistance, focusing on epidemics and referrals. Search and rescue operations for saving lives and disposal of corpses. Hazardous materials, identification and disposal of these hazardous material. Food and water, provision of food and drinking water. And another important one, energy, provision of necessary power supply, generators, solar on immediate usage. Military support, public information, gathering information from forecasting agencies and control rooms and disseminating the information to the public for early alerts as a proactive measure. Volunteers and donation, motivating the volunteers like NSS, NCC and civil society in response activities and mobilizing donations. Law enforcement, maintaining law and order until the situation normalizes, especially during the man-made disasters. Animal services, rescuing animals as a part of response operations. The post-disaster operations vary depending on the type of disaster situations. Unique rescue operations and strategies are to be adopted for earthquakes, floods and tsunami and for a fire accident. The community capacity building, enhancing the capacities of the communities can give an scope for building resilient communities. These activities would boost the morale and confidence levels and also heighten the self-esteem of the local people. The capacity building exercises are essential in sustainable development. They improve the abilities of people in identifying the available resources and utilizing them in a proper way and for a purpose to face any crisis situation. So, enhancing the capacities of other stakeholders. Not only focusing on communities, we need to concentrate on enhancing the capacities of the other agencies involved in the disaster management activities. Providing appropriate inputs through trainings would make them experts. Training is for imparting knowledge and improving skills, but also to bring attitudinal changes among the stakeholders. Trainings are for building self-dependent, self-reliant, empowered institutions. And another one, rehearsals and mock drills aimed at assimilating the task and for perfection in their endeavors. They develop team spirit and helps in identifying gray areas in the process of planning and execution. So, integration of other parties is an essential task in disaster management, where many stakeholders and agencies are involved. For a synergic action, channelizing their strengths by adopting coordinating mechanisms and practices would yield better results. A case study from Leh, a flash floods in the year 2010, Leh in the state of Jammu and Kashmir had witnessed a heavy downpour resulted flash floods. As per the records of Jammu and Kashmir government, around 234 people lost their lives and 800 were badly injured. Thousands of houses and infrastructure they had earlier were washed away. The Indian Army was the first responder for search and rescue operations and medical aid. The Army immediately used their helicopters for rescuing the affected people. The survivors who sustained injuries and fractures were shifted to their Army Command Hospital for medical assistance. The runway was immediately cleared for proper air transport. The Army used their communication systems to coordinate the response operations. On the next day, the Army engineers assisted the local administration in repairing roads for restoring transportation system. It was a unique example highlights the importance of armed forces in disaster management. A well-trained squad and facilities that they possess saved thousands of lives. Another case study, this is from Nepal during the earthquake in 2015. The armed forces were deployed in the neighboring country Nepal in 2015 when an earthquake created serious devastation, claiming thousands of fatalities. The Indian Army and Air Force rescued about 11,200 survivors and dropped 1,700 tons of food and other essential material. The Operation Maitri was carried out in most isolated and far-flung areas of Nepal by using C-130J and C-17 IL-76 aircrafts for airlifting. The medical squad extended medical aid to 10,000 people. And this is another case study from our own flooding in Uttarakhand in 2013. The unseasonal monsoons that struck the state of Uttarakhand triggered the landslides and floods. Over 30% of the state's economy was affected. People's life was threatened and the worst sufferers were pilgrims. Totally 9 districts were affected, leaving 71 casualties and 25 missing. Livestock lost up to 1,200. The army helicopters conducted aerial survey in Kedarnath region. Around 5,000 personnel were deployed in the operation Ganga Prahar. They rescued 22,392 and airlifted around 18,000 persons, delivered 336 tons of relief material using 83 Indian Air Force aircrafts. The Army conducted investigation studies in the remote hilly areas of Uttarakhand. The Army initiated work to improve helipad at Gangaria and Hemkund Sahib access for speeder aerial evacuation. The Army rendered its services in the affected areas till the situation normalized. So, this is another case study during this Operation Madad in Chennai floods in 2015. Chennai, the capital of Tamil Nadu state, had experienced severe rainfall in 2015, resulting devastating floods in the city. Under the Operation Madad, the tri-armed forces were deployed in the rescue and post-disaster services. More than 500 squads were deployed in the operation. The Indian Navy provided boats and rescue material from its Rajaji base camp. The Indian Air Force provided relief material for the affected people with the request of the civil administration. The forces assisted them by using all their advanced equipment. So, now let us sum up what we have learned till now. Disaster management is a hectic task where multiple players are to be involved strategically. When the crisis situation challenges the capabilities of the civil administration, usually the armed forces are requested to intervene. The primary function of the army is to protect the country from external threats. Involvement in emergency situations and for maintaining law and order could be the secondary function. The tri-forces of India were deployed in handling crisis management several times. The Disaster Management Act mandated to establish National Disaster Relief Force and State Disaster Relief Force for effective disaster management. At present, 12 trained battalions are functioning across the country. The military and the paramilitary forces are also requested to intervene into the relief operations. Their contribution is seen in the aftermath of disasters in providing facilities like transportation, medical, communication, search and rescue operations, etc. There is a paradigm shift in the role of armed forces from reactive mode to proactive mode by providing preparedness trainings, training of trainers, etc. The trainings they undergo adaptability and discipline and conviction towards the country's well-being lists them at the top of the service providers in disaster management activities.